Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with us. Before we get started though, I just want to say how much we appreciate you being here with us and ready to learn something new.
Yeah.
It's truly amazing. Feeling grateful can actually help you learn better.
Oh, yeah.
So a big thanks from both of us for joining us today. So let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Today we're taking a look at aminoglycosides. Have you heard of them?
I have heard of them, yes.
Okay, great. Well, they're these really powerful antibiotics that doctors use to fight some pretty serious infections. Bacterial infections, that is.
Yeah.
You can think of them like elite soldiers, highly trained to take down those nasty bacterial invaders.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
And don't worry if you've never heard of them before. By the end of this deep dive, you'll be an aminoglycoside expert, ready to impress all your friends with all your newfound knowledge.
Absolutely. So what's really interesting about aminoglycosides is that they were actually discovered while scientists were searching for new weapons against bacteria. This was after penicillin had already made its grand entrance, remember? Okay. And this was back in the 1940s.
Wow, so long ago.
I know. The world was really just starting to grasp the incredible power of antibiotics.
Right.
And the very first aminoglycoside, streptomycin, was like a total game changer.
Oh, wow.
It was isolated from this type of bacteria found in the soil called Streptomyces grueseus.
Streptomyces grueseus. So that's like the superhero that gave us our very first aminoglycoside weapon.
Exactly. And of course, the quest for better antibiotics, it didn't just stop there, right? Scientists, they always want to find more and more effective ways to combat those bacterial bad guys.
Oh, I bet. So they're probably working hard to improve those antibiotics.
Oh, yeah, they were. And the development of aminoglycosides was all about overcoming certain challenges like toxicity. And also, those sneaky bacteria, they kept developing resistance.
Those pesky bacteria. They're always trying to outsmart us. It's like they're saying, nice try, humans, but we're one step ahead.
That's exactly it. It's like a constant arms race, with scientists always trying to outsmart those evolving bacteria.
I can only imagine the frustration when those bacteria find new ways to resist.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, what's with all the mycin and icin names? Is there like a secret code behind those endings?
You're catching on. The mycin ending, it usually means that the aminoglycoside, it comes from Streptomyces, the bacteria we talked about before.
Right.
While the icin ending, that typically points to other sources or even synthetic origins. It's like a little clue that tells you where those antibiotics come from.
I love those little scientific Easter eggs.
Right.
But let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. What exactly are aminoglycosides? Like, what do they look like at a molecular level? Are they like tiny ninja stars or something?
Well, they're definitely not simple. Imagine a central ring.
Yeah.
Kind of like the hub of a wheel, right?
Okay, I can picture that.
And attached to it are these sugar molecules called hexosugar moieties.
Hexosugar moieties.
And there's this other part called 2-deoxystreptamine.
2-deoxystreptamine, got it.
And these sugar molecules are super important because they help the aminoglycoside actually do its job of, fighting those bacteria.
Okay, so we've got this central ring with these sugar attachments. It kind of sounds like a delicious but deadly treat. But how do they actually work? How do they take down those bacterial bad guys?
Okay, so picture this. The aminoglycoside is like a special forces unit, right?
Yeah.
With a multi-step plan to take down the enemy.
Yep.
First, they target the outer membrane of gram-negative bacteria. And this outer membrane, it acts like a protective wall for the bacteria.
Oh, I see.
But the aminoglycosides, they disrupt these bridges that hold this wall together, making it weaker.
So it's like breaking down the enemy's defenses before launching the main attack.
Exactly. And then they have to get inside the bacteria to really do their damage, right?
Right.
So they use this kind of sneaky transport system that needs energy to work.
Oh, so they can't just waltz in?
Nope. It's more like a secret passage that needs a special key.
I like it.
And once they're inside, they target the bacteria's ribosomes.
Ribosomes? What are those again?
Oh, they're like tiny factories that create all the proteins that the bacteria needs to survive.
Essential proteins, got it.
And the aminoglycosides, they mess up these factories, causing them to produce faulty proteins.
It's like sabotaging the enemy's production line. They're trying to build weapons, but they keep getting duds.
Precisely.
That's brilliant. But I imagine there are things that can affect how well these aminoglycosides work, right?
You're right.
Like maybe the environment they're in.
Absolutely. Think of it like a battlefield, right? The conditions on the ground can really affect the outcome of the fight.
Right.
So in this case, things like acidity, oxygen levels, the concentration of certain molecules, even the temperature, these can all influence how effectively the aminoglycosides can do their job.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we know how they attack, but how do they actually get to the battlefield? I'm guessing they don't just stroll in and start fighting.
No, definitely not. They need a special delivery system.
Like a helicopter or something.
Haha, sort of. This is where we talk about pharmacokinetics.
Pharmacokinetics?
Yeah, or PK for short.
EK, right?
It's basically what the body does to a drug.
Okay.
And aminoglycosides, they aren't absorbed very well when taken orally.
Oh, so you can't just swallow a pill.
Not really, no. They need to be administered intravenously.
Intravenously?
Yeah, directly into the bloodstream. It's like a direct flight to the battle zone.
Straight to the front lines. No messing around.
Exactly.
So once they're in the bloodstream, what happens? Do they just hang out there forever?
Not at all. They have what we call a half-life.
Half-life.
Yeah, it means they break down and get eliminated from the body fairly quickly, usually within a few hours.
A few hours. So they're in and out pretty fast.
They are. They get distributed throughout the body and are mainly eliminated by the kidneys.
Okay.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Their elimination process, it's not just a simple one-and-done kind of deal.
Oh.
It's actually a three-phase process. Think of it like a three-act play.
A three-act play. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this elimination drama.
All right, so in Act 1, the aminoglycosides are quickly distributed from the blood into the tissues.
Yeah.
It's like the opening scene where all the characters are introduced and the stage is set.
Okay, got it. What about Act 2?
Act 2 is where the kidneys come in. They work really hard to eliminate the drug from the body. This is the climax of the play where all the action unfolds.
The kidneys are the heroes here.
You could say that.
Right? What about the final act?
Act 3 is the resolution, where things start to settle down. But there might be some lingering effects because a tiny amount of the drug is slowly released from the tissues.
Ah, so even though the main action is over, there's still some drama happening behind the scenes. And why is this three-phase elimination so important? Does it affect how the drug works or how it's dosed?
It does. Understanding this whole three-phase elimination thing is really crucial for figuring out the right dose and managing potential side effects. Because some of the drug hangs out in the tissues, it can still have an effect even after the main concentration in the blood has decreased.
It's like the after effects of a big battle, huh?
Exactly.
But speaking of battles, how exactly do aminoglycosides kill bacteria? Is it a slow and steady process, or do they go in with a quick and decisive strike?
Well, that's where pharmacodynamics comes in, or PD for short.
PD, okay. Another acronym to remember.
I know there are a lot of them.
Yep.
But PD is all about what the drug does to the body.
Got it.
Specifically, how it interacts with those bacterial bad guys.
Okay.
And aminoglycosides are known for their concentration-dependent killing.
Concentration-dependent killing, what does that mean?
It means that the higher the concentration of the drug at the site of infection, the more effective they are at wiping out those bacteria.
So it's like a targeted airstrike. More bombs you drop, the greater the impact.
You got it. And we measure this effectiveness using ratios like Cmax-MIC and Ossium-Bax.
Those sound a little complicated.
They do, but bear with me for a second. Cmax is the peak concentration of the drug in the blood.
Peak concentration, so like the highest point on a roller coaster.
Exactly. And AUC, that represents the total drug exposure over time, like the total area under that roller coaster track.
Okay, I'm following so far.
Now, MIC, that stands for minimum inhibitory concentration. It's the minimum amount of drug needed to stop the bacteria from growing. Kind of like a speed limit that the bacteria can't exceed.
Ah, bacterial speed limit. I like that. So we want these ratios, these Cmax and AUC-MIC ratios, to be high.
Exactly. We want a high concentration of the drug compared to the minimum amount needed to stop those bacteria in their tracks.
So the higher the ratio, the better the outcome.
Yeah.
Like having a much bigger army than your enemy.
Precisely. Now, do those bacteria stay down for the count after that initial attack, or can they, bounce back?
That's a great question.
Well, aminoglycosides have this special trick up their sleeve called the post-antibiotic effect.
Post-antibiotic effect.
Or PAE for short.
Another acronym.
I know. But it means that they can keep suppressing bacterial growth even after the drug levels have fallen below that minimum inhibitory concentration we talked about.
So they leave a lasting impression, huh? Even after the main attack is over, the bacteria are probably like, whoa, those aminoglycosides were tough. We're not messing with them again anytime soon.
Exactly.
But how do doctors decide on the best way to administer these powerful drugs? Is there a standard approach?
Not exactly. There are two main dosing strategies. We have once daily dosing and conventional dosing.
Okay, tell me more about those.
So once daily dosing is kind of like a powerful single strike, delivering a high dose all at once to achieve that high peak concentration and really maximize that bacterial kill.
So a knockout punch.
Yes. And then you have conventional dosing, which is more like a steady bombardment, giving smaller doses multiple times a day to maintain a constant level of the drug.
So a series of jabs.
Exactly. It's like choosing between a knockout punch and a series of jabs.
It all depends on the situation, right? And the type of bacteria they're fighting.
You got it. It's all about finding the right balance between effectiveness and making sure we minimize any potential side effects.
It's a delicate balance for sure.
It is. So speaking of testing your knowledge, are you up for a little pop quiz?
Cool, pop quiz. Bring it on. I'm feeling ready.
Okay, here's your first challenge. Which of the following best describes how aminoglycosides work? Are they A, bacteriostatic, meaning they stop bacteria from growing, or B, bactericidal, meaning they kill bacteria,
Bacteriostatic or bactericidal.
or do they C, block the process of transcription, where DNA is copied into RNA, or D, disrupt the process of translation, where RNA is used to build proteins? Take your time, think about it, and we'll break it all down after a quick break.
All right, everyone. Time for a little brain workout.
Okay, let's go over that quiz question. The answer is B, aminoglycosides are bactericidal, meaning they're not just stopping those bacteria from growing. No, they're actually killing them. And how they do it is they mess with that process of translation, remember translation, where RNA is used to make proteins.
Oh, yeah, like a bacterial recipe book, right?
Exactly. Think of it like this. The bacteria have this blueprint for building proteins, and the aminoglycosides come in and they basically scramble those instructions. So you end up with these faulty proteins that just can't do their jobs.
It's like giving the bacteria a recipe for delicious cake, but swapping the sugar for salt. They're expecting something sweet and delicious, but they get a very nasty surprise instead.
That's a great way to put it. So we've talked about how they attack, but now let's talk about who they target. What kind of bacteria are these aminoglycoside warriors most effective against?
Yeah. Who's on their hit list?
Well, you can think of aminoglycosides as having a most wanted list. A set of bacteria that they're really, really good at taking down. They're especially good at fighting gram-negative bacteria.
Gram-negative, okay.
Which is a specific type of bacteria with a specific cell structure. And some of their most common targets, they include E. coli, Klebsiella.
Klebsiella. Heard of that one?
Yeah. And these are often responsible for things like UTIs.
UTIs, right.
And then you've got Pseudomonas aeruginosa.
Pseudomonas aeruginosa. That sounds like a supervillain.
It does, doesn't it? It's actually a notorious troublemaker in the bacterial world, known for causing some really tough infections to treat.
So luckily, we've got our aminoglycoside heroes to fight them off. But what about other types of bacteria, like gram-positive bacteria? Are aminoglycosides effective against those too?
They can be, but it often requires a team effort.
Team effort.
Yeah, aminoglycosides have kind of limited activity against gram-positive bacteria, so they often need to partner up with other antibiotics to really effectively combat them. It's like calling in reinforcements for a bigger battle.
Ah, so it's like the Avengers assembling.
Exactly. And when it comes to anaerobic bacteria and atypical bacteria, well, those are usually resistant to aminoglycosides.
Resistant, what do you mean?
Well, these types of bacteria, they either don't need oxygen to survive, or they have some unique characteristics that make them harder to target with aminoglycosides.
Ah, so they're like wearing bulletproof vests, making them immune to those aminoglycoside attacks.
That's a good way to think about it. But you mentioned teamwork earlier, Ray. Can you tell me more about how aminoglycosides actually work together with other antibiotics?
Yeah, how does that synergy thing work?
Right. So synergy, it's a really important concept when it comes to antibiotics, because sometimes just one antibiotic alone, it's not enough to defeat those bacterial bad guys.
It's like they need backup.
Exactly. So by combining different antibiotics, we can create a much more powerful attack.
Ah, strength in numbers.
Precisely. And aminoglycosides are often used in combination with other antibiotics to broaden that spectrum of activity.
Broaden the spectrum.
Yeah, it means that they can target a wider range of bacteria. And this is super important when you're dealing with those tricky resistant bacteria.
The ones that are always trying to outsmart us.
Exactly. Those bacteria have found ways to dodge the effects of certain antibiotics. So by using a combination, we can increase our chances of success.
It's like combining the skills of different superheroes. Each one has their own unique strengths and weaknesses, but together they can overcome pretty much any challenge. But even with that powerful synergy, those bacteria, they aren't just giving up, right? They have their ways of fighting back.
Of course. Bacteria, they're incredibly adaptable and they're constantly evolving to survive.
Pesky little things.
They are. And when it comes to aminoglycosides, they've developed three main ways to resist those effects. The most common way is something called enzymatic modification.
Enzymatic modification, okay.
It's a mouthful, I know. But imagine this. The bacteria, they produce special enzymes.
What are enzymes again?
They're like tiny tools that can change the structure of the aminoglycoside molecule.
So they're like putting a disguise on the antibiotic, so it's no longer recognized by its target.
Exactly. They're basically changing the antibiotic's appearance so that it can't do its job properly.
Sneaky little buggers. What are those other two resistance mechanisms?
Right. So the second one is called decreased uptake. Some bacteria, they can modify their outer membrane, that protective wall we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the one the aminoglycosides try to break down.
Right. So they make this wall even harder for the aminoglycoside to get inside.
So it's like they're building a thicker wall with fewer entry points. Pretty clever.
Very clever. And then the third mechanism, that's altered ribosome binding. Remember those ribosomes, the protein-making factories? Well, some bacteria can change the structure of their ribosomes, making it harder for the aminoglycoside to bind and disrupt protein synthesis.
So it's like changing the locks on the doors so the antibiotic can't get in.
You got it. They're constantly evolving to outsmart those antibiotics.
Bacteria are like masterminds of disguise and defense. It's like a never-ending game of cat and mouse between the antibiotics and those sneaky bacteria. Okay, ready for another pop quiz?
Hit me with it.
All right, so this time, let's focus on something called the PK/PD index. It helps us understand just how effective an antibiotic is. Here's the question. Which PK/PD index best describes the effectiveness of aminoglycosides? Is it A, Cmax-MIC, B, AUC.MIC, C, time-MIC, or D, Cmin-MIC? Remember all that stuff we talked about with concentration-dependent killing? The answer might be right there in front of you.
Okay, listeners, put your thinking caps on. This is a good one. Okay, let's break down that PK/PD index question. The answer is Cmax-MIC. Remember, aminoglycosides are all about that strong initial attack. They're concentration-dependent killers, remember. We really want that peak concentration, that Cmax, to be much higher than the MIC, that minimum amount needed to stop those bacteria. It's like making sure your army is way bigger than your enemies.
Cmax greater than MIC. Got it.
Oh,
It's all about that overwhelming force. But we've talked about the good stuff, how powerful aminoglycosides are. We've talked about how bacteria try to resist them. Now let's talk about the potential downsides, because even the most skilled warriors can sometimes cause some unintended damage.
Right, you're absolutely right. Aminoglycosides are really effective, but they can also have side effects. And the two most important ones are ototoxicity and nephrotoxicity.
Ototoxicity and nephrotoxicity. Whoa, those are some serious sounding words. What do they even mean?
Okay, so ototoxicity, that means damage to the ear, particularly the inner ear, and that's super important for both hearing and balance.
Oh, I see.
And what's concerning about ototoxicity is that it can be irreversible, meaning the damage can be permanent.
So it's like friendly fire, but to our own senses.
Yeah.
It's definitely something to be careful about. And what about nephrotoxicity? What is that?
Nephrotoxicity, that means damage to the kidneys. Those amazing organs that filter our blood and get rid of all the waste?
Right.
Well, aminoglycosides can sometimes build up in the kidneys and cause damage to those delicate filtering units.
Oh, no. It's like those filters getting clogged up with debris from the battle. And what causes that damage? Is it just the aminoglycosides themselves, or are there other things that contribute to it?
It's actually a combination of things. The longer someone's treated with aminoglycosides, the greater the chance of kidney damage. Age plays a role, too. Older people tend to be more susceptible to this nephrotoxicity. And of course, if someone already has kidney problems, they're at an even higher risk.
So it's kind of a cumulative effect, right? The longer the battle goes on and the more vulnerable the terrain, the higher the risk of damage. But is there any way to keep an eye on these side effects, like catch them early before things get really bad?
Yes, definitely. It's super important to monitor kidney function regularly with blood tests and hearing tests, too, during aminoglycoside treatment. It's like having scouts on the lookout for any signs of trouble so we can act fast. Early detection is key to minimizing any long-term damage.
Early detection and a quick response, that's the best strategy. And to help our listeners remember these two important side effects, how about a little mnemonic trick? Think AON, A for aminoglycosides, O for ototoxicity, and N for nephrotoxicity. Easy peasy.
I love that. Mnemonics are always helpful for remembering the important stuff.
Okay, so we know aminoglycosides are these powerful weapons against bacteria, but they also have the potential for these, serious side effects. So how do doctors decide when and how to use them? Are they always the first line of defense?
Not always, no. Think of aminoglycosides as like the special forces of the antibiotic world.
Okay,
They're super strong and effective, but they also come with risks, so you have to use them strategically.
got it.
They're often reserved for when other antibiotics just haven't worked, or for infections caused by really tough bacteria that are resistant to other treatments.
So it's like calling in the big guns when you're facing a truly formidable enemy.
Exactly. For example, aminoglycosides can be used alone, we call that monotherapy, for things like uncomplicated UTIs.
Uncomplicated UTIs, right?
Yeah, in these cases, the infection is usually localized and relatively easy to treat, so the risk of those side effects is a bit lower. But for more complicated infections, ones that have spread to the bloodstream or other organs, then aminoglycosides are often used in combination with other antibiotics. It's all about hitting those bacteria from multiple angles.
It's like creating a super team of antibiotics to tackle those tough infections.
Oh.
So it's all about choosing the right tool for the job and carefully weighing the risks and benefits for each individual case. Speaking of testing our knowledge, you ready for one final pop quiz?
Hit me with it.
All right, this is a clinical scenario. Imagine you're treating a patient with an infection caused by some seriously resistant bacteria. The MIC, that minimum inhibitory concentration for this bacteria, is 4 millivita GML. What peak concentration of plazomicin should you aim for to make sure you're giving an effective dose? Is it A, 6 milligml, B, 12 milligml, C, 24 milligml, or D, 32 milligml? Remember, concentration is super important when it comes to aminoglycosides. Think carefully, everyone. This is your final challenge.
See if you can apply all that knowledge we've been talking about.
Okay, time for the big reveal. The correct answer is D, 32 millis UVMLO. We want that peak concentration to be way higher than the MIC, right? That's how we deliver that knockout punch to the bacteria. In this case, aiming for a peak of 32 milligml gives us a good safety margin, and it really maximizes our chances of success. And that brings us to the end of our aminoglycoside adventure.
Wow, it's been an incredible journey. We've covered so much ground today. We've explored the history of these powerful antibiotics, gotten into their complex mechanisms, and learned how they're used to fight off those bacterial infections. And of course, we talked about those challenges of resistance and the importance of using these drugs carefully.
And a huge thank you to all of you, our wonderful listeners, for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've learned some fascinating things about the amazing world of aminoglycosides. Remember, knowledge is power. The more you know about these drugs, the better equipped you are to make informed decisions about your health. So keep learning, stay curious, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.